Creativity is a phenomenon whereby something new and valuable is created. The ideas and concepts so conceived can then manifest themselves in any number of ways, but most often, they become something we can see, hear, smell, touch, or taste. The range of scholarly interest in creativity includes a multitude of definitions and approaches involving several disciplines: psychology, cognitive science, education, philosophy, technology, theology, sociology, linguistics, business studies, songwriting and economics, taking in the relationship between creativity and general intelligence, mental and neurological processes associated with creativity, the relationships between personality type and creative ability and between creativity and mental health, the potential for fostering creativity through education and training, especially as augmented by technology, and the application of creative resources to improve the effectiveness of learning and teaching processes. Definition: in a summary of scientific research into creativity, Michael Mumford suggested, over the course of the last decade, however, we seem to have reached a general agreement that creativity involves the production of novel, useful products. Creativity can also be defined as the process of producing something that is both original and worthwhile, or characterized by originality and expressiveness and imaginative. What is produced can come in many forms and is not specifically singled out in a subject or area. Authors have diverged dramatically in their precise definitions beyond these general commonalities. Peter Meyerberger reckons that over 100 different analyses can be found in the literature. Then a creativity is a mind skill, equipping us to make any new idea in any area. Then a creativity is essentially not a kind of knowledge or science, but it is a skill kind, may be improved through various methods. Hamid Rajai 2008, hence, creativity is an almost steady ability to generate a new concept with no time, age, kind, manner, way, techniques, advantage, efficacy and subject limitation and restriction. But only precisely, is related to novelty and recency. So it only identified by generating recent or new concept. Whether seems so floppy and ineffective or very serious and polestar. Whether established on an existent concept made before, or some is fundamentally made up recently. Whether created and made up by mind power or made by mind ready-made material before. Aspects, theories of creativity have focused on a variety of aspects. The dominant factors are usually identified as the 4Ps: process, product, person and place. A focus on process is shown in cognitive approaches that try to describe thought mechanisms and techniques for creative thinking. Theories invoking divergent rather than convergent thinking, or those describing the staging of the creative process, are primarily theories of creative process. A focus on creative product usually appears in attempts to measure creativity and in creative ideas framed as successful MEMS. The psychometric approach to creativity reveals that it also involves the ability to produce more. A focus on the nature of the creative person considers more general intellectual habits, such as openness, levels of ideation, autonomy, expertise, exploratory behavior and so on. A focus on place considers the circumstances in which creativity flourishes, such as degrees of autonomy, access to resources and the nature of gatekeepers. Creative lifestyles are characterized by non-conforming attitudes and behaviors as well as flexibility. Etymology: the lexeme in the English word creativity comes from the Latin term crea, to create, make. Its derivational suffixes also come from Latin. The word create appeared in English as early as the 14th century, notably in Chaucer, to indicate divine creation. However, its modern meaning as an act of human creation did not emerge until after the Enlightenment. History of the concept. Ancient views. Most ancient cultures, including thinkers of ancient Greece, ancient China, and ancient India, lacked the concept of creativity, seeing art as a form of discovery and not creation. The ancient Greeks had no terms corresponding to create, or creator except for the expression poiein, which only applied to poiesis and to the poets who made it. Plato did not believe in art as a form of creation. Asked in the Republic, will we say, of a painter, that he makes something? He answers, Certainly not, he merely imitates. It is commonly argued that the notion of creativity originated in Western culture through Christianity, as a matter of divine inspiration. According to the historian Daniel J. Boston, the early Western conception of creativity was the biblical story of creation given in the Genesis. However, this is not creativity in the modern sense, which did not arise until the Renaissance. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, creativity was the sole province of God. Humans were not considered to have the ability to create something new except as an expression of God's work. A concept similar to that of Christianity existed in Greek culture. For instance, muses were seen as mediating inspiration from the gods. Romans and Greeks invoked the concept of an external creative demon, or genius, linked to the sacred or the divine. However, none of these views are similar to the modern concept of creativity, and the individual was not seen as the cause of creation until the Renaissance. It was during the Renaissance that creativity was first seen, not as a conduit for the divine, but from the abilities of great men. The Enlightenment and after, the rejection of creativity in favor of discovery and the belief that individual creation was a conduit of the divine would dominate the West probably until the Renaissance and even later. The development of the modern concept of creativity begins in the Renaissance, when creation began to be perceived as having originated from the abilities of the individual, and not God. However, this shift was gradual and would not become immediately apparent until the Enlightenment. By the 18th century and the Age of Enlightenment, mention of creativity, linked with the concept of imagination, became more frequent. In the writing of Thomas Hobbes, imagination became a key element of human cognition. William Duff was one of the first to identify imagination as a quality of genius, typifying the separation being made between talent and genius. As a direct and independent topic of study, creativity effectively received no attention until the 19th century. Ranco and Albert argue that creativity as the subject of proper study began seriously to emerge in the late 19th century with the increased interest in individual differences inspired by the arrival of Darwinism. In particular they refer to the work of Francis Galton, who through his eugenicist outlook took a keen interest in the heritability of intelligence, with creativity taken as an aspect of genius. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, leading mathematicians and scientists such as Hermann von Helmholtz and Henri Poincaré began to reflect on and publicly discuss their creative processes. 20th century to the present day, the insights of Poincaré and von Helmholtz were built on an early accounts of the creative process by pioneering theorists such as Graham Wallas and Max Wertheimer. In his work Art of Thought, published in 1926, Wallas presented one of the first models of the creative process. In the Wallas stage model, creative insights and illuminations may be explained by a process consisting of 5 stages: I. Preparation, E. Incubation, E. Intimation, if, illumination or insight. V. Verification. Wallas' model is often treated as 4 stages, with intimation seen as a substage. Wallas considered creativity to be a legacy of the evolutionary process, which allowed humans to quickly adapt to rapidly changing environments. Symington provides an updated perspective on this view in his book, Origins of Genius, Darwinian Perspectives on Creativity. In 1927, Alfred North Whitehead gave the Gifford Lectures at the University of Edinburgh, later published as Process and Reality. He is credited with having coined the term creativity to serve as the ultimate category of his metaphysical scheme. Whitehead actually coined the term a Euro term, still the preferred currency of exchange among literature, science, and the arts. A term that quickly became so popular, so omnipresent, that its invention within living memory, and by Alfred North Whitehead of all people, quickly became occluded. The formal psychometric measurement of creativity, from the standpoint of orthodox psychological literature, is usually considered to have begun with J. P. Guilford's 1950 address to the American Psychological Association, which helped popularize the topic and focus attention on a scientific approach to conceptualizing creativity. Statistical analysis led to the recognition of creativity as a separate aspect of human cognition to IQ-type intelligence, into which it has previously been subsumed. Guilford's work suggested that above a threshold level of IQ, the relationship between creativity and classically measured intelligence broke down. 4C model. James C. Kaufman and Beghetto introduced a 4C model of creativity. Mini C, Little c, Pro C and Big C. This model was intended to help accommodate models and theories of creativity that stressed competence as an essential component and the historical transformation of a creative domain as the highest mark of creativity. It also, the authors argued, made a useful framework for analyzing creative processes in individuals. The contrast of terms Big C and Little c has been widely used. Kotzebue, Beghetto and Co. use a Little c Big C model to review major theories of creativity. Margaret Bodden distinguishes between H creativity and P creativity. Robinson and Anna Kraft have focused on creativity in a general population, particularly with respect to education. Kraft makes a similar distinction between high and Little c creativity and cites Ken Robinson as referring to high and democratic creativity. Miralik has defined creativity in terms of those individuals judged to have made significant creative, perhaps domain-changing contributions. Simonton has analyzed the career trajectories of eminent creative people in order to map patterns and predictors of creative productivity. Theories of creative processes. There has been much empirical study in psychology and cognitive science of the processes through which creativity occurs. Interpretation of the results of these studies has led to several possible explanations of the sources and methods of creativity. Incubation. Incubation is a temporary break from creative problem-solving that can result in insight. There has been some empirical research looking at whether, as the concept of incubation in Waller's model implies, a period of interruption or rest from a problem may aid creative problem-solving. Ward lists various hypotheses that have been advanced to explain why incubation may aid creative problem-solving, and notes how some empirical evidence is consistent with the hypothesis that incubation aids creative problem-solving in that it enables forgetting of misleading clues. Absence of incubation may lead the problem-solver to become fixated on inappropriate strategies of solving the problem. This work disputes the earlier hypothesis that creative solutions to problems arise mysteriously from the unconscious mind while the conscious mind is occupied on other tasks. Convergent and divergent thinking. J. P. Guilford drew a distinction between convergent and divergent production. Convergent thinking involves aiming for a single, correct solution to a problem, whereas divergent thinking involves creative generation of multiple answers to a set problem. Divergent thinking is sometimes used as a synonym for creativity in psychology literature. Other researchers have occasionally used the terms flexible thinking or fluid intelligence, which are roughly similar to creativity. Creative cognition approach. In 1992, Fink et al. Proposed the Gen-Plur model, in which creativity takes place in two phases, a generative phase, where an individual constructs mental representations called pre-inventive structures, and an exploratory phase where those structures are used to come up with creative ideas. Some evidence shows that when people use their imagination to develop new ideas, those ideas are heavily structured in predictable ways by the properties of existing categories and concepts. Weisberg argued, by contrast, that creativity only involves ordinary cognitive processes yielding extraordinary results. The explicit-implicit interaction theory. Helly and Son recently proposed a unified framework for understanding creativity in problem-solving, namely the explicit-implicit interaction theory of creativity. This new theory constitutes an attempt at providing a more unified explanation of relevant phenomena. The EII theory relies mainly on 5 basic principles, namely 1, the coexistence of and the difference between explicit and implicit knowledge. 2, the simultaneous involvement of implicit and explicit processes in most tasks. 3, the redundant representation of explicit and implicit knowledge. 4, the integration of the results of explicit and implicit processing. And 5, the iterative processing. A computational implementation of the theory was developed based on the Clarion cognitive architecture and used to simulate relevant human data. This work represents an initial step in the development of process-based theories of creativity encompassing incubation, insight, and various other related phenomena. Conceptual blending. In The Act of Creation, Arthur Koestler introduced the concept of dissociation, that creativity arises as a result of the intersection of two quite different frames of reference. This idea was later developed into conceptual blending. In the 90s, various approaches in cognitive science that dealt with metaphor, analogy and structure mapping have been converging, and a new integrative approach to the study of creativity in science, art and humor has emerged under the label conceptual blending. Honing theory posits that creativity arises due to the self-organizing, self-mending nature of a worldview, and that it is by way of the creative process the individual hones an integrated worldview. Honing theory places equal emphasis on the externally visible creative outcome and the internal cognitive restructuring brought about by the creative process. Indeed, one factor that distinguishes it from other theories of creativity is that it focuses on not just restructuring as it pertains to the conception of the task, but as it pertains to the worldview as a whole. When faced with a creatively demanding task, there is an interaction between the conception of the task and the worldview. The conception of the task changes through interaction with the worldview, and the worldview changes through interaction with the task. This interaction is reiterated until the task is complete, at which point not only is the task conceived of differently, but the worldview is subtly or drastically transformed. Thus another distinguishing feature of honing theory is that the creative process reflects the natural tendency of a worldview to attempt to resolve dissonance and seek internal consistency amongst its components, whether they be ideas, attitudes, or bits of knowledge. It mends itself as does a body when it has been injured. Yet another central, distinguishing feature of honing theory is the notion of a potentiality state. Honing theory posits that creative thought proceeds not by searching through and randomly mutating unregistered trademark predefined possibilities, but by drawing upon associations that exist due to overlap in the distributed neural cell assemblies that participate in the encoding of experiences in memory. Midway through the creative process, one may have made associations between the current task and previous experiences, but not yet disambiguated which aspects of those previous experiences are relevant to the current task. Thus the creative idea may feel half-baked unregistered trademark. It is at that point that it can be said to be in a potentiality state, because how it will actualize depends on the different internally or externally generated contexts it interacts with. Honing theory can account for many phenomena that are not readily explained by other theories of creativity. For example, creativity was commonly thought to be fostered by a supportive, nurturing, trustworthy environment conducive to self-actualization. However, research shows that creativity is actually associated with childhood adversity, which would stimulate honing. Honing theory also makes several predictions that differ from what would be predicted by other theories. For example, empirical support has been obtained using analogy problem-solving experiments for the proposal that midway through the creative process one's mind is in a potentiality state. Other experiments show that different works by the same creator exhibit a recognizable style or voice, and that this same recognizable quality even comes through in different creative outlets. This is not predicted by theories of creativity that emphasize chance processes or the accumulation of expertise, but it is predicted by honing theory, according to which personal style reflects the creator's uniquely structured worldview. This theory has been developed by Liane Gabora. Everyday imaginative thought. In everyday thought, people often spontaneously imagine alternatives to reality when they think if only. Their counterfactual thinking is viewed as an example of everyday creative processes. It has been proposed that the creation of counterfactual alternatives to reality depends on similar cognitive processes to rational thought. Measuring creativity quotient. Several attempts have been made to develop a creativity quotient of an individual similar to the intelligence quotient, however these have been unsuccessful. In Malcolm Gladwell's 2008 book Outliers, The Story of Success, there is mentioning of a divergence test. As opposed to convergence tests, where a test taker is asked to sort through a list of possibilities and converge on the right answer. A divergence test requires one to use imagination and take one's mind in as many different directions as possible. With a divergence test, obviously there isn't a single right answer. What the test giver is looking for are the number and uniqueness of your responses. And what the test is measuring isn't analytical intelligence but something profoundly different, something much closer to creativity. Divergence tests are every bit as challenging as convergence tests. Psychometric approach, J.P. Guilford's group, which pioneered the modern psychometric study of creativity, constructed several tests to measure creativity in 1967, plot titles, where participants are given the plot of a story and asked to write original titles. Quick responses is a word association test scored for uncommonness. Figure concepts, where participants were given simple drawings of objects and individuals and asked to find qualities or features that are common by two or more drawings. These were scored for uncommonness. Unusual uses is finding unusual uses for common everyday objects such as bricks. Remote associations, where participants are asked to find a word between two given words. Remote consequences, where participants are asked to generate a list of consequences of unexpected events. Building on Guilford's work, Torrance developed the Torrance test of creative thinking in 1966. They involved simple tests of divergent thinking and other problem-solving skills, which were scored on fluency the total number of interpretable, meaningful and relevant ideas generated in response to the stimulus. Originality the statistical rarity of the responses among the test subjects. Elaboration the amount of detail in the responses. The Creativity Achievement Questionnaire, a self-report test that measures creative achievement across 10 domains, was described in 2005 and shown to be reliable and valid when compared to other measures of creativity and to independent evaluation of creative output. Such tests, sometimes called divergent thinking tests, have been both supported and criticized. Social personality approach. Some researchers have taken a social personality approach to the measurement of creativity. In these studies, personality traits such as independence of judgment, self-confidence, attraction to complexity, aesthetic orientation and risk-taking are used as measures of the creativity of individuals. A meta-analysis by Gregory Feist showed that creative people tend to be more open to new experiences, less conventional and less conscientious, more self-confident, self-accepting, driven, ambitious, dominant, hostile, and impulsive. Openness, conscientiousness, self-acceptance, hostility and impulsivity had the strongest effects of the traits listed. Within the framework of the Big Five model of personalities, some consistent traits have emerged. Openness to experience has been shown to be consistently related to a whole host of different assessments of creativity. Among the other Big Five traits, research has demonstrated subtle differences between different domains of creativity. Compared to non-artists, artists tend to have higher levels of openness to experience and lower levels of conscientiousness, while scientists are more opening to experience, conscientious, and higher in the confidence-dominance facets of extroversion compared to non-scientists. Declining U.S. creativity. Creativity as measured by the Torrance test of creative thinking increased until 1990 in the United States, an effect similar to the Flynn effect. Thereafter scores have been declining. Possible causes include increased time spent watching TV, increased time spent playing computer games, or lacking nurturing of creativity in schools. There may also be a mistaken assumption that encouraging creativity in schools necessarily involve the arts when it also can be encouraged in other subjects. A growing global educational reform movement commonly known as 21st century learning aims to promote creativity across the curriculum. In general, it advocates teaching lifelong skills such as critical thinking, problem-solving, collaboration and communication for core academic subjects including science, technology, engineering and math, as well as the arts. Insofar as the movement promotes a new focus on teaching learning creativity and innovation skills through activities that promote higher-order thinking skills, it also requires the development of additional metrics to score originality and innovation, as well as technical correctness. Odyssey of the Mind is a non-profit educational program that provides challenging divergent problems to foster original thinking across the curriculum, and has effectively promoted creativity education worldwide since the 1970s. Odyssey of the Mind World Finals is the pinnacle international team-based creative problem-solving competition, and an annual festival to celebrate creativity education. Odyssey of the Mind helps educators easily implement 21st-century learning skills at every learning level, and has been sponsored by NASA to encourage creativity education in the United States. Intelligence. There has been debate in the psychological literature about whether intelligence and creativity are part of the same process or represent distinct mental processes. Evidence from attempts to look at correlations between intelligence and creativity from the 1950s onwards, by authors such as Barron, Guilford or Wallach and Kogan, regularly suggested that correlations between these concepts were low enough to justify treating them as distinct concepts. Some researchers believe that creativity is the outcome of the same cognitive processes as intelligence, and is only judged as creativity in terms of its consequences, that is when the outcome of cognitive processes happens to produce something novel, a view which Perkins has termed the nothing special hypothesis. An often cited model is what has come to be known as the threshold hypothesis, proposed by Ellis Paul Torrance, which holds that a high degree of intelligence appears to be a necessary but not sufficient condition for high creativity. That is, while there is a positive correlation between creativity and intelligence, this correlation disappears for IQs above a threshold of around 120. Such a model has found acceptance by many researchers, although it has not gone unchallenged. A study in 1962 by Gesels and Jackson among high school students concluded that high IQ and high creativity tend to be mutually exclusive, with a majority of the highest scoring students being either highly creative or highly intelligent, but not both. While this explains the threshold, the exact interaction between creativity and IQ remains unexplained. A 2005 meta-analysis found only small correlations between IQ and creativity tests and did not support the threshold theory. An alternative perspective, Rensselaer's three rings hypothesis, sees giftedness as based on both intelligence and creativity. Many experts have suggested a relationship between associative memory and creativity. Neurobiology. The neurobiology of creativity has been addressed in the article Creative Innovation, Possible Brain Mechanisms. The authors write that creative innovation might require coactivation and communication between regions of the brain that ordinarily are not strongly connected. Highly creative people who excel at creative innovation tend to differ from others in three ways: they have a high level of specialized knowledge, they are capable of divergent thinking mediated by the frontal lobe, and they are able to modulate neurotransmitters such as norepinephrine in their frontal lobe. Thus, the frontal lobe appears to be the part of the cortex that is most important for creativity. This article also explored the links between creativity and sleep, mood and addiction disorders, and depression. In 2005, Alice Flaherty presented a three-factor model of the creative drive. Drawing from evidence in brain imaging, drug studies and lesion analysis, she described the creative drive as resulting from an interaction of the frontal lobes, the temporal lobes, and dopamine from the limbic system. The frontal lobes can be seen as responsible for idea generation, and the temporal lobes for idea editing and evaluation. Abnormalities in the frontal lobe generally decrease creativity, while abnormalities in the temporal lobe often increase creativity. High activity in the temporal lobe typically inhibits activity in the frontal lobe, and vice versa. High dopamine levels increase general arousal and goal-directed behaviors and reduce latent inhibition, and all three effects increase the drive to generate ideas. Working memory and the cerebellum. Van der Wert described how the brain's frontal lobes and the cognitive functions of the cerebellum collaborate to produce creativity and innovation. Van der Wert's explanation rests on considerable evidence that all processes of working memory are adaptively modeled for increased efficiency by the cerebellum. The cerebellum is also widely known to adaptively model all bodily movement for efficiency. The cerebellum's adaptive models of working memory processing are then fed back to especially frontal lobe working memory control processes where creative and innovative thoughts arise. According to van der Wert, the details of creative adaptation begin in forward cerebellar models which are anticipatory exploratory controls for movement and thought. These cerebellar processing and control architectures have been termed hierarchical modular selection and identification for control. New, hierarchically arranged levels of the cerebellar control architecture develop as mental mulling in working memory is extended over time. These new levels of the control architecture are fed forward to the frontal lobes. Since the cerebellum adaptively models all movement and all levels of thought and emotion, van der Wert's approach helps explain creativity and innovation in sports, art, music, the design of video games, technology, mathematics, the child prodigy, and thought in general. Essentially, van der Wert has argued that when a person is confronted with a challenging new situation, visual spatial working memory and speech-related working memory are decomposed and recomposed by the cerebellum and then blended in the cerebral cortex in an attempt to deal with the new situation. With repeated attempts to deal with challenging situations, the cerebro-cerebellar blending process continues to optimize the efficiency of how working memory deals with a situation or problem. Most recently, he has argued that this is the same process that led to the evolution of language in humans. Van der Wert and van der Wert-Weathers have pointed out that this blending process, because it continuously optimizes efficiencies, constantly improves prototyping attempts toward the invention or innovation of new ideas, music, art, or technology. Prototyping, they argue, not only produces new products, it trains the cerebro-cerebellar pathways involved to become more efficient at prototyping itself. Further, van der Wert and van der Wert-Weathers believe that this repetitive mental prototyping, or mental rehearsal involving the cerebellum and the cerebral cortex explains the success of the self-driven, individualized patterning of repetitions initiated by the teaching methods of the Khan Academy. The model proposed by van der Wert has however received incisive critique from several authors. REM sleep, creativity involves the forming of associative elements into new combinations that are useful or meet some requirement. Sleep aids this process. REM rather than NREM sleep appears to be responsible. This has been suggested to be due to changes in cholinergic and noradrenergic neuromodulation that occurs during REM sleep. During this period of sleep, high levels of acetylcholine in the hippocampus suppress feedback from the hippocampus to the neocortex, and lower levels of acetylcholine and norepinephrine in the neocortex encourage the spread of associational activity within neocortical areas without control from the hippocampus. This is in contrast to waking consciousness, where higher levels of norepinephrine and acetylcholine inhibit recurrent connections in the neocortex. It is proposed that REM sleep adds creativity by allowing neocortical structures to reorganize associative hierarchies, in which information from the hippocampus would be reinterpreted in relation to previous semantic representations or nodes. Effect. Some theories suggest that creativity may be particularly susceptible to affective influence. As noted in voting behavior, the term effect in this context can refer to liking or disliking key aspects of the subject in question. This work largely follows from findings in psychology regarding the ways in which affective states are involved in human judgment and decision-making. Positive affect relations. According to Alice Eisen, positive affect has three primary effects on cognitive activity. Positive affect makes additional cognitive material available for processing, increasing the number of cognitive elements available for association. Positive affect leads to defocused attention and a more complex cognitive context, increasing the breadth of those elements that are treated as relevant to the problem. Positive affect increases cognitive flexibility, increasing the probability that diverse cognitive elements will in fact become associated. Together, these processes lead positive affect to have a positive influence on creativity. Barbara Fredrickson in her Broaden and Build model suggests that positive emotions such as joy and love broaden a person's available repertoire of cognitions and actions, thus enhancing creativity. According to these researchers, Positive emotions increase the number of cognitive elements available for association and the number of elements that are relevant to the problem. Various meta-analyses, such as Bass et al. Of 66 studies about creativity and affect, support the link between creativity and positive affect, negative affect relations. On the other hand, some theorists have suggested that negative affect leads to greater creativity. A cornerstone of this perspective is empirical evidence of a relationship between affective illness and creativity. In a study of 1,005 prominent 20th-century individuals from over 45 different professions, the University of Kentucky's Arnold Ludwig found a slight but significant correlation between depression and level of creative achievement. In addition, several systematic studies of highly creative individuals and their relatives have uncovered a higher incidence of affective disorders than that found in the general population. Affect at work. 3 patterns may exist between affect and creativity at work. Positive mood, or change in mood, predictably precedes creativity. Creativity predictably precedes mood. And whether affect and creativity occur simultaneously. It was found that not only might affect precede creativity, but creative outcomes might provoke affect as well. At its simplest level, the experience of creativity is itself a work event, and like other events in the organizational context, it could evoke emotion. Qualitative research and anecdotal accounts of creative achievement in the arts and sciences suggest that creative insight is often followed by feelings of elation. For example, Albert Einstein called his 1907 general theory of relativity the happiest thought of my life. Empirical evidence on this matter is still very tentative. In contrast to the possible incubation effects of affective state on subsequent creativity, the affective consequences of creativity are likely to be more direct and immediate. In general, affective events provoke immediate and relatively fleeting emotional reactions. Thus, if creative performance at work is an affective event for the individual doing the creative work, such an effect would likely be evident only in same-day data. Another longitudinal research found several insights regarding the relations between creativity and emotion at work. Firstly, evidence shows a positive correlation between positive affect and creativity. The more positive a person's affect on a given day, the more creative thinking they evidenced that day and the next day are even controlling for that next day's mood. There was even some evidence of an effect 2 days later. In addition, the researchers found no evidence that people were more creative when they experienced both positive and negative affect on the same day. The weight of evidence supports a purely linear form of the affect-creativity relationship, at least over the range of affect and creativity covered in our study. The more positive a person's affect, the higher their creativity in a work setting. Finally, they found 4 patterns of affect and creativity. Affect can operate as an antecedent to creativity, as a direct consequence of creativity, as an indirect consequence of creativity, and affect can occur simultaneously with creative activity. Thus, it appears that people's feelings and creative cognitions are interwoven in several distinct ways within the complex fabric of their daily work lives. Formal theory. Jawan Kortara G. N. Schmiduba's formal theory of creativity postulates that creativity, curiosity and interestingness are byproducts of a simple computational principle for measuring and optimizing learning progress. Consider an agent able to manipulate its environment and thus its own sensory inputs. The agent can use a black box optimization method such as reinforcement learning to learn sequences of actions that maximize the expected sum of its future reward signals. There are extrinsic reward signals for achieving externally given goals, such as finding food when hungry. But Schmiduba's objective function to be maximized also includes an additional, intrinsic term to model wow effects. This non-standard term motivates purely creative behavior of the agent even when there are no external goals. A wow effect is formally defined as follows. As the agent is creating and predicting and encoding the continually growing history of actions and sensory inputs, it keeps improving the predictor or encoder, which can be implemented as an artificial neural network or some other machine learning device that can exploit regularities in the data to improve its performance over time. The improvements can be measured precisely, by computing the difference in computational costs needed to encode new observations before and after learning. This difference depends on the encoder's present subjective knowledge, which changes over time, but the theory formally takes this into account. The cost difference measures the strength of the present wow effect due to sudden improvements in data compression or computational speed. It becomes an intrinsic reward signal for the action selector. The objective function thus motivates the action optimizer to create action sequences causing more wow effects. Irregular, random data do not permit any wow effects or learning progress, and thus are boring by nature. Already known and predictable regularities also are boring. Temporarily interesting are only the initially unknown, novel, regular patterns in both actions and observations. This motivates the agent to perform continual, open-ended, active, creative exploration. According to Schmidhuber, his objective function explains the activities of scientists, artists and comedians. For example, physicists are motivated to create experiments leading to observations obeying previously unpublished physical laws permitting better data compression. Likewise, composers receive intrinsic reward for creating non-arbitrary melodies with unexpected but regular harmonies that permit wow effects through data compression improvements. Similarly, a comedian gets intrinsic reward for inventing a novel joke with an unexpected punchline, related to the beginning of the story in an initially unexpected but quickly learnable way that also allows for better compression of the perceived data. Schmidhuber argues that ongoing computer hardware advances will greatly scale up rudimentary artificial scientists and artists based on simple implementations of the basic principles since 1990. He used the theory to create low-complexity art and an attractive human face. Mental health. A study by psychologist J. Philippe Rushton found creativity to correlate with intelligence and psychoticism. Another study found creativity to be greater in schizotypal and in either normal or schizophrenic individuals. While divergent thinking was associated with bilateral activation of the frontal cortex, schizotypal individuals were found to have much greater activation of their right frontal cortex. This study hypothesizes that such individuals are better at accessing both hemispheres, allowing them to make novel associations at a faster rate. In agreement with this hypothesis, ambidexterity is also associated with schizotypal and schizophrenic individuals. 3 recent studies by Mark Beatty and Adrian Furnham have demonstrated the relationships between schizotypal and hypomanic personality and several different measures of creativity. Particularly strong links have been identified between creativity and mood disorders, particularly manic depressive disorder and depressive disorder. In Touched with Fire, Manic Depressive Illness and the Artistic Temperament, K. Redfield Jamison summarizes studies of mood disorder rates in writers, poets and artists. She also explores research that identifies mood disorders in such famous writers and artists as Ernest Hemingway, Virginia Woolf, composer Robert Schumann, and even the famed visual artist Michelangelo. A study looking at 300,000 persons with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder or unipolar depression, and their relatives, found overrepresentation in creative professions for those with bipolar disorder as well as for undiagnosed siblings of those with schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. There was no overall overrepresentation, but overrepresentation for artistic occupations, among those diagnosed with schizophrenia. There was no association for those with unipolar depression or their relatives. Another study involving more than 1 million people, conducted by Swedish researchers at the Karolinska Institute, reported a number of correlations between creative occupations and mental illnesses. Writers had a higher risk of anxiety and bipolar disorders, schizophrenia, unipolar depression, and substance abuse, and were almost twice as likely as the general population to kill themselves. Dancers and photographers were also more likely to have bipolar disorder. However, as a group, those in the creative professions were no more likely to suffer from psychiatric disorders than other people, although they were more likely to have a close relative with a disorder, including anorexia and, to some extent, autism, the Journal of Psychiatric Research reports. According to psychologist Robert Epstein, Ph.D., Creativity can be obstructed through stress. Some types of creativity according to R. J. Sternberg, an article by R. J. Sternberg and the Creativity Research Journal reviewed the investment theory of creativity as well as the propulsion theory of creative contribution, suggesting that there are 8 types of creative contribution. Replication, confirming that the given field is in the correct place. Redefinition, the attempt to redefine where the field is and how it is viewed. Forward incrementation, a creative contribution that moves the field forward in the direction in which it is already moving. Advance forward movement, which advances the field past the point where others are ready for it to go. Redirection, which moves the field in a new, different direction. Redirection from a point in the past, which moves the field back to a previous point to advance in a different direction. Starting over/reinitiation, moving the field to a different starting point. And integration, combining 2 or more diverse ways of thinking about the field into a single way of thinking. In various contexts, creativity has been studied from a variety of perspectives and is important in numerous contexts. Most of these approaches are undisciplinary, and it is therefore difficult to form a coherent overall view. The following sections examine some of the areas in which creativity is seen as being important. Creativity profiles. Creativity can be expressed in a number of different forms, depending on the unique people and environments it exists. A number of different theorists have suggested models of the creative person. One model suggests that there are kinds to produce growth, innovation, speed, etc. These are referred to as the 4 creativity profiles that can help achieve such goals. I. Incubate, E. Imagine, E. Improve, if, invest. Research by Dr. Mark Beatty of the Psychometrics at Work Research Group at Manchester Business School has suggested that the creative profile can be explained by 4 primary creativity traits with narrow facets within each. I. Idea generation, E. Personality, E. Motivation, if, confidence. This model was developed in a sample of 1,000 working adults using the statistical techniques of exploratory factor analysis followed by confirmatory factor analysis by structural equation modeling. An important aspect of the creativity profiling approach is to account for the tension between predicting the creative profile of an individual, as characterized by the psychometric approach, and the evidence that team creativity is founded on diversity and difference. One characteristic of creative people, as measured by some psychologists, is what is called divergent production. Divergent production is the ability of a person to generate a diverse assortment, yet an appropriate amount of responses to a given situation. One way of measuring divergent production is by administering the Torrance test of creative thinking. The Torrance test of creative thinking assesses the diversity, quantity, and appropriateness of participants' responses to a variety of open-ended questions. Other researchers of creativity see the difference in creative people as a cognitive process of dedication to problem-solving and developing expertise in the field of their creative expression. Hard-working people study the work of people before them and within their current area, become experts in their fields, and then have the ability to add to and build upon previous information in innovative and creative ways. In a study of projects by design students, students who had more knowledge on their subject on average had greater creativity within their projects. The aspect of motivation within a person's personality may predict creativity levels in the person. Motivation stems from 2 different sources, intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is an internal drive within a person to participate or invest as a result of personal interest, desires, hopes, goals, etc. Extrinsic motivation is a drive from outside of a person and might take the form of payment, rewards, fame, approval from others, etc. Although extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation can both increase creativity in certain cases, strictly extrinsic motivation often impedes creativity in people. From a personality traits perspective, there are a number of traits that are associated with creativity in people. Creative people tend to be more open to new experiences, are more self-confident, are more ambitious, self-accepting, impulsive, driven, dominant, and hostile, compared to people with less creativity. From an evolutionary perspective, creativity may be a result of the outcome of years of generating ideas. As ideas are continuously generated, the need to evolve produces a need for new ideas and developments. As a result, people have been creating and developing new, innovative, and creative ideas to build our progress as a society. In studying exceptionally creative people in history, some common traits in lifestyle and environment are often found. Creative people in history usually had supportive parents, but rigid and non-nurturing. Most had an interest in their field at an early age, and most had a highly supportive and skilled mentor in their field of interest. Often the field they chose was relatively uncharted, allowing for their creativity to be expressed more in a field with less previous information. Most exceptionally creative people devoted almost all of their time and energy into their craft, and after about a decade had a creative breakthrough of fame. Their lives were marked with extreme dedication and a cycle of hard work and breakthroughs as a result of their determination. Another theory of creative people is the investment theory of creativity. This approach suggests that there are many individual and environmental factors that must exist in precise ways for extremely high levels of creativity opposed to average levels of creativity. In the investment sense, a person with their particular characteristics in their particular environment may see an opportunity to devote their time and energy into something that has been overlooked by others. The creative person develops an undervalued or under-recognized idea to the point that it is established as a new and creative idea. Just like in the financial world, some investments are worth the buy-in, while others are less productive and do not build to the extent that the investor expected. This investment theory of creativity views creativity in a unique perspective compared to others, by asserting that creativity might rely to some extent on the right investment of effort being added to a field at the right time in the right way. In diverse cultures, creativity is viewed differently in different countries. For example, cross-cultural research centered on Hong Kong found that Westerners view creativity more in terms of the individual attributes of a creative person, such as their aesthetic taste, while Chinese people view creativity more in terms of the social influence of creative people, for example what they can contribute to society. Mpofu al. surveyed 28 African languages and found that 27 had no word which directly translated to creativity. The principle of linguistic relativity, that is that language can affect thought, suggests that the lack of an equivalent word for creativity may affect the views of creativity among speakers of such languages. However, more research would be needed to establish this, and there is certainly no suggestion that this linguistic difference makes people any less creative. Africa has a rich heritage of creative pursuits such as music, art, and storytelling. Nevertheless, it is true that there has been very little research on creativity in Africa, and there has also been very little research on creativity in Latin America. Creativity has been more thoroughly researched in the Northern Hemisphere, but here again there are cultural differences, even between countries or groups of countries in close proximity. For example, in Scandinavian countries, creativity is seen as an individual attitude which helps in coping with life's challenges, while in Germany, creativity is seen more as a process that can be applied to help solve problems. In art and literature, most people associate creativity with the fields of art and literature. In these fields, originality is considered to be a sufficient condition for creativity, unlike other fields where both originality and appropriateness are necessary. Within the different modes of artistic expression, one can postulate a continuum extending from interpretation to innovation. Established artistic movements and genres pull practitioners to the interpretation end of the scale, whereas original thinkers strive towards the innovation pole. Note that we conventionally expect some creative people to perform while allowing others more freedom to express the new and the different. Contrast alternative theories, for example, artistic inspiration, which provides the transmission of visions from divine sources such as the Muses. A taste of the divine. Compare with invention. Artistic evolution, which stresses obeying established rules and imitating or appropriating to produce subtly different but unshockingly understandable work. Compare with crafts, artistic conversation, as in surrealism, which stresses the depth of communication when the creative product is the language. In the art practice and theory of David Zalto, human creativity is taken as a basic feature of both the personal existence of human being and art production. For this thinker, creativity is a basic cultural and anthropological category, since it enables human manifestation in the world as a real presence in contrast to the progressive virtualization of the world. Psychological examples from science and mathematics. Jack Hadamard, in his book Psychology of Invention in the Mathematical Field, uses introspection to describe mathematical thought processes. In contrast to authors who identify language and cognition, he describes his own mathematical thinking as largely wordless, often accompanied by mental images that represent the entire solution to a problem. He surveyed 100 of the leading physicists of his day, asking them how they did their work. Many of the responses mirrored his own. Hadamard described the experiences of the mathematicians theoretical physicists Carl Friedrich Gauss, Hermann von Helmholtz, Henri Poincaré Copyright and others as viewing entire solutions with sudden spontaneity. The same has been reported in literature by many others, such as Dennis Bryan, G. H. Hardy, Walter Heitler, B. L. van der Waerden, and Harold Roeg. To elaborate on one example, Einstein, after years of fruitless calculations, suddenly had the solution to the general theory of relativity revealed in a dream like a giant die making an indelible impress. A huge map of the universe outlined itself in one clear vision. Hadamard described the process as having steps: preparation, incubation, illumination, and verification of the five-step Graham-Waller's creative process model, leaving out intimation, with the first three cited by Hadamard as also having been put forth by Helmholtz. Marie-Louise von Franz, a colleague of the eminent psychiatrist Carl Jung, noted that in these unconscious scientific discoveries the always recurring and important factor is the simultaneity with which the complete solution is intuitively perceived and which can be checked later by discursive reasoning. She attributes the solution presented as an archetypal pattern or image. As cited by von Franz, according to Jung, archetypes manifest themselves only through their ability to organize images and ideas, and this is always an unconscious process which cannot be detected until afterwards. Creative industries and services. Today, creativity forms the core activity of a growing section of the global economy. The so-called creative industries are capitalistically generating wealth through the creation and exploitation of intellectual property or through the provision of creative services. The Creative Industries Mapping Document 2001 provides an overview of the creative industries in the UK. The creative professional workforce is becoming a more integral part of industrialised nations' economies. Creative professions include writing, art, design, theatre, television, radio, motion pictures, related crafts, as well as marketing, strategy, some aspects of scientific research and development, product development, some types of teaching and curriculum design, and more. Since many creative professionals are also employed in secondary professions, estimates of creative professionals are often inaccurate. By some estimates, approximately 10 million U.S. workers are creative professionals. Depending upon the depth and breadth of the definition, this estimate may be double. In other professions, creativity is also seen as being increasingly important in a variety of other professions. Architecture and industrial design are the fields most often associated with creativity, and more generally the fields of design and design research. These fields explicitly value creativity, and journals such as Design Studies have published many studies on creativity and creative problem-solving. Fields such as science and engineering have, by contrast, experienced a less explicit relation to creativity. Simonton shows how some of the major scientific advances of the 20th century can be attributed to the creativity of individuals. This ability will also be seen as increasingly important for engineers in years to come. Accounting has also been associated with creativity with the popular euphemism creative accounting. Although this term often implies unethical practices, Amabile has suggested that even this profession can benefit from the application of creative thinking. In a recent global survey of approximately 1,600 CEOs, The leadership trait that was considered to be most crucial for success was creativity. This suggests that the world of business is beginning to accept that creativity is a value in a diversity of industries, rather than being simply the preserve of the creative industries. For instance, the civil service has benefited from employing creative writers, from John Milton, to Anthony Trollope, to Flann O'Brien, who are capable of analyzing the workings of their own institutions. In organizations, it has been the topic of various research studies to establish that organizational effectiveness depends on the creativity of the workforce to a large extent. For any given organization, measures of effectiveness vary, depending upon its mission, environmental context, nature of work, the product or service it produces, and customer demands. Thus, the first step in evaluating organizational effectiveness is to understand the organization itself, how it functions, how it is structured, and what it emphasizes. Amabile argued that to enhance creativity in business, three components were needed: expertise, creative thinking skills, and motivation. There are two types of motivation: extrinsic motivation external factors, for example threats of being fired or money as a reward; intrinsic motivation comes from inside an individual, satisfaction, enjoyment of work etc. 6 managerial practices to encourage motivation are: challenge matching people with the right assignments; freedom giving people autonomy choosing means to achieve goals; resources such as time, money, space etc. There must be balance fit among resources and people. Workgroup features diverse, supportive teams, where members share the excitement, willingness to help and recognize each other's talents. Supervisory encouragement recognitions, cheering, praising. Organizational support value emphasis, information sharing, collaboration. Nonaka, who examined several successful Japanese companies, similarly saw creativity in knowledge creation as being important to the success of organizations. In particular, he emphasized the role that tacit knowledge has to play in the creative process. In business, originality is not enough. The idea must also be appropriate useful and actionable. Creative competitive intelligence is a new solution to solve this problem. According to Joe Siltala, it links creativity to innovation process and competitive intelligence to creative workers. Creativity can be encouraged in people and professionals and in the workplace. It is essential for innovation, and is a factor affecting economic growth and businesses. In 2013, the sociologist Sylvia Leal-Marta N., using the ANOVA 3DX method, suggested measuring the various parameters that encourage creativity and innovation: corporate culture, work environment, leadership and management, creativity, self-esteem and optimism, locus of control and learning orientation, motivation and fear. Economic views of creativity. Economic approaches to creativity have focused on 3 aspects: the impact of creativity on economic growth, methods of modeling markets for creativity, and the maximization of economic creativity. In the early 20th century, Joseph Schumpeter introduced the economic theory of creative destruction, to describe the way in which old ways of doing things are endogenously destroyed and replaced by the new. Some economists view creativity as an important element in the recombination of elements to produce new technologies and products and, consequently, economic growth. Creativity leads to capital, and creative products are protected by intellectual property laws. Mark Aronko and Daniel Rubinson have tried to describe a psychoeconomic model of creativity. In such a model, creativity is the product of endowments and active investments in creativity. The costs and benefits of bringing creative activity to market determine the supply of creativity. Such an approach has been criticized for its view of creativity consumption as always having positive utility, and for the way it analyzes the value of future innovations. The creative class is seen by some to be an important driver of modern economies. In his 2002 book, The Rise of the Creative Class, economist Richard Florida popularized the notion that regions with 3 T's of economic development, technology, talent and tolerance also have high concentrations of creative professionals and tend to have a higher level of economic development. The creative industries in Europe, including the audiovisual sector, make a significant contribution to the EU economy, creating about 3% of EU GDP, corresponding to an annual market value of $500 billion, and employing about 6 million people. In addition, the sector plays a crucial role in fostering innovation, in particular for devices and networks. The EU records the second highest TV viewing figures globally, producing more films than any other region in the world. In that respect, the newly proposed Creative Europe program will help preserve cultural heritage while increasing the circulation of creative works inside and outside the EU. The program will play a consequential role in stimulating cross-border cooperation, promoting peer learning and making these sectors more professional. The Commission will then propose a financial instrument run by the European Investment Bank to provide debt and equity finance for cultural and creative industries. The role of the non-state actors within the governance regarding medias will not be neglected anymore due to a holistic approach. Social network view of creativity. Creativity research has long been polarized between the a-Euro-romantic a-Euro-unregistered trademark view that major creative achievements are sparked by imaginative and uniquely gifted individuals at the margin of an intellectual field. Although this remains the dominant approach when examining individual creativity, an increasingly large number of studies have stressed the importance of also looking at social factors. Following this line of thought and drawing more explicitly from research by sociologists and sociopsychologists, organizational scholars have increasingly recognized the importance of the network side of individual creativity. The key idea of this perspective is that a deeper understanding of how creative outputs are generated and become accepted can be achieved only by placing the individual within a network of interpersonal relationships. The influence of the social context in which individuals are embedded determines the range of information and opportunities available to them during the creative process. Several studies have begun to expose the network mechanisms that underlie the genesis and legitimacy of creative work. Fostering creativity. Daniel Pink, in his 2005 book A Whole New Mind, Repeating Arguments Posed Throughout the 20th Century, argues that we are entering a new age where creativity is becoming increasingly important. In this conceptual age, we will need to foster and encourage right-directed thinking over left-directed thinking. However, this simplification of right versus left brain thinking is not supported by the research data. Nickerson provides a summary of the various creativity techniques that have been proposed. These include approaches that have been developed by both academia and industry, establishing purpose and intention, building basic skills, encouraging acquisitions of domain-specific knowledge, stimulating and rewarding curiosity and exploration, building motivation, especially internal motivation, encouraging confidence and a willingness to take risks, focusing on mastery and self-competition, promoting supportable beliefs about creativity, providing opportunities for choice and discovery, developing self-management, teaching techniques and strategies for facilitating creative performance, providing balance. Some see the conventional system of schooling as stifling of creativity and attempt to provide a creativity-friendly, rich, imagination-fostering environment for young children. Researchers have seen this as important because technology is advancing our society at an unprecedented rate and creative problem-solving will be needed to cope with these challenges as they arise. In addition to helping with problem-solving, creativity also helps students identify problems where others have failed to do so. See the Waldorf School as an example of an education program that promotes creative thought. Promoting intrinsic motivation and problem-solving are two areas where educators can foster creativity in students. Students are more creative when they see a task as intrinsically motivating, valued for its own sake. To promote creative thinking, educators need to identify what motivates their students and structure teaching around it. Providing students with a choice of activities to complete allows them to become more intrinsically motivated and therefore creative in completing the tasks. Teaching students to solve problems that do not have well-defined answers is another way to foster their creativity. This is accomplished by allowing students to explore problems and redefine them, possibly drawing on knowledge that at first may seem unrelated to the problem in order to solve it. Several different researchers have proposed methods of increasing the creativity of an individual. Such ideas range from the psychological cognitive, such as Osborne-Parnes' creative problem-solving process, synectics, science-based creative thinking, Purdue Creative Thinking Program, and Edward de Bono's lateral thinking, to the highly structured, such as TRIZ and its variant algorithm of inventive problem-solving, computer-aided morphological analysis and the method of orbiting around the issue in 360 degrees, three basic elements of creativity: copy, transform, combine. Understanding and enhancing the creative process with new technologies. A simple but accurate review on this new human-computer interactions angle for promoting creativity has been written by Todd Lubart, an invitation full of creative ideas to develop further this new field. Groupware and other computer-supported collaborative work platforms are now the stage of network creativity on the web or on other private networks. These tools have made more obvious the existence of a more connective, cooperative and collective nature of creativity rather than the prevailing individual one. Creativity research on global virtual teams is showing that the creative process is affected by the national identities, cognitive and conative profiles, anonymous interactions at times and many other factors affecting the team's members, depending on the early or later stages of the cooperative creative process. They are also showing how NGOs' cross-cultural virtual teams innovation in Africa would also benefit from the pooling of best global practices online. Such tools enhancing cooperative creativity may have a great impact on society and as such should be tested while they are built following the motto, build the camera while shooting the film. Some European FP7 scientific programs like Paradiso are answering a need for advanced experimentally driven research including large-scale experimentation test beds to discover the technical, societal and economic implications of such groupware and collaborative tools to the Internet. On the other hand, creativity research may one day be pooled with a computable meta-language like IEML from the University of Ottawa Collective Intelligence Chair, Pierre Levy. It might be a good tool to provide an interdisciplinary definition and a rather unified theory of creativity. The creative processes being highly fuzzy, the programming of cooperative tools for creativity and innovation should be adaptive and flexible. Empirical modeling seems to be a good choice for humanities computing. If all the activity of the universe could be traced with appropriate captors, it is likely that one could see the creative nature of the universe to which humans are active contributors. After the web of documents, the web of things might shed some light on such a universal creative phenomenon which should not be restricted to humans. In order to trace and enhance cooperative and collective creativity, Metis Reflexive Global Virtual Team has worked for the last few years on the development of a trace composer at the intersection of personal experience and social knowledge. Metis Reflexive Team has also identified a paradigm for the study of creativity to bridge European theory of useless and non-instrumentalized creativity, North American more pragmatic creativity and Chinese culture stressing more creativity as a holistic process of continuity rather than radical change and originality. This paradigm is mostly based on the work of the German philosopher Hans Joas, one that emphasizes the creative character of human action. This model allows also for a more comprehensive theory of action. Joas elaborates some implications of his model for theories of social movements and social change. The connection between concepts like creation, innovation, production and expression is facilitated by the creativity of action as a metaphor but also as a scientific concept. The Creativity and Cognition Conference Series, sponsored by the ACM and running since 1993, has been an important venue for publishing research on the intersection between technology and creativity. The conference now runs biennially, next taking place in 2011. Social attitudes. Although the benefits of creativity to society as a whole have been noted, social attitudes about this topic remain divided. The wealth of literature regarding the development of creativity and the profusion of creativity techniques indicate wide acceptance, at least among academics, that creativity is desirable. There is, however, a dark side to creativity. in that it represents a quest for a radical autonomy apart from the constraints of social responsibility. In other words, by encouraging creativity we are encouraging a departure from society's existing norms and values. Expectation of conformity runs contrary to the spirit of creativity. Ken Robinson argues that the current education system is educating people out of their creativity. Nevertheless, employers are increasingly valuing creative skills. A report by the Business Council of Australia, for example, has called for a higher level of creativity in graduates. The ability to think outside the box is highly sought after. However, the above-mentioned paradox may well imply that firms pay lip service to thinking outside the box while maintaining traditional, hierarchical organization structures in which individual creativity is condemned. See also: adaptive performance, brainstorming, computational creativity, confabulation, escape, a technology and approach that looks specifically at the assessment of creativity and collaboration. Greatness, heroic theory of invention and scientific development, innovation, invention, lateral thinking, learned industriousness, malevolent creativity, multiple discovery, music therapy, musical improvisation, why man creates, notes. References. Further reading: Chung-Yuan, Chang. Creativity and Taoism, A Study of Chinese Philosophy, Art, and Poetry. New York, Harper Torch Books. ISBN A0-06-131968-6. Cropley, David H. Cropley, Arthur J. Kaufman, James C. A. L., eds. The Dark Side of Creativity. Cambridge, Cambridge University Press. ISBN A978-0-521-13960-1. Les Summeria, Robinson, Andrew. Sudden Genius? The Gradual Path to Creative Breakthroughs. Oxford, Oxford University Press. ISBN A978-0-19-956995-3. Les Summeria, The Roots of Human Genius Are Deeper Than Expected. March 10, 2013. Scientific American, Videos, John Cleese, on Creativity, March 23, 2012. Raphael D. Liozio, 7 Steps of Creative Thinking, June 28, 2012.